So tell me below, what do you think is in store for Poland? And to be fair, if you think Poland is bad, next we're going to look at North Korea. Okay, so North Korea is of course a terrible place to live in, but recently the Financial Times published an interesting piece called North Korea, the Failure of Maximum Pressure on Kim's Isolated Regime. It's by Edward White, reporting in Seoul. Basically, it's a summary on North Korea's antics to try to get around the sanctions that were placed on it by the US. It's kind of funny, so let's go through some of the antics that the Kim regime is doing right now. Of course, let's first take a step back. I know I'm trying to do something jovial here, but the North Korean people are suffering 100%, and it is extremely sad what's happening in North Korea. But let's have a little bit of a laugh at Kim's expense, but let's remember the North Korean people are suffering. So the North Korean government had this extremely bright idea to basically send thousands of workers, just massive dumps of overseas workers to the Gulf states, explicitly Kuwait, to try to earn some form of money. So they sent 100,000 workers and they generated $500 million in currency, but then Kuwait decided to follow UN sanctions, so that decreased the amount of workers that were able to go to Kuwait and collect money for the regime, which is kind of funny because then North Korea stopped being able to afford the rent on the Kuwaiti embassy, and they had to literally leave to cheaper premises. It's like when you're looking for an apartment and you can't find one, so you have to go to a slumlord's apartment. It is extremely funny. And the sanctions basically destroy North Korea's ability to make money outside of North Korea. So they've moved to, number one, cryptocurrency theft, and number two, cyber warfare. So the cryptocurrency theft is kind of working in the sense that they're getting crypto, but the other thing is that cryptocurrency is not that lucrative. All cryptocurrency theft is $316 million. I don't think that this is for North Korea just. I think it's for all cryptocurrency theft. Although, for some reason, the Financial Times doesn't link the report, so I can't find out. Regardless, there's 316 million generally, which you may note is less than the 500 million that North Korea was getting from Kuwait. And that 316 million is, I think, global. So North Korea is probably taking a fraction of that, and they're not even taking Bitcoin. They're taking Proton tokens, Play Game tokens, and IHT real estate protocol tokens, which I've never even heard of these, so I don't know what they're doing. So they're going against virtual assets, and it seems like they're not doing that well. And of course, you have the coronavirus pandemic. The title of this video, I think, will be about what I'm about to discuss now, which is that North Korea has locked down its borders entirely, and they're doing shoot to kill on anyone who violates it. So if you're trying to cross the border, you're going to get shot, which, sucks, right, if you're trying to get into North Korea. But then on the other side, who's trying to get into North Korea? The question remains. Maybe there are some people who have family in North Korea or who are trying to be refugees, because North Korea, of course, has a lot of people fleeing North Korea to China, and then from there outside of China. So that's pretty clearly bad. But even worse for the North Korean people is the fact that, actually, let's take a step back here. In socialist countries, there tend to be, and I use socialist in the terms of a political scientist, a state socialist country like North Korea, there tend to be large black markets. So these black markets, or these are actually gray markets, called Jangmadang, are just getting completely destroyed because there's so little money and there's so little savings because of the decline in trade that has been huge. And that huge decline in trade has really ruined a lot of people's economic livelihood. So a lot of this is completely crazy, but then when you consider the fact that North Korea is actually ramping up its missile tests since 2015, they have more missile tests. Of course, that has gone down with COVID because they just don't have money for it. But there are a lot of missile tests that are occurring in North Korea, and their people are suffering. So it's a really sad state of affairs. I will link this in the description if anyone wants to see this article. It's extremely crazy, and North Korea is basically losing a lot of money. Something to briefly discuss with this article, though, is that this article does claim that the sanctions should probably be lifted, and that's because they don't work. Although, the question for me is, do they not work, or do they hurt the North Korean people? Because I think those are two different things. I think they do hurt the North Korean people, but also they may work in order to not allow North Korea to continue producing nuclear weapons, because it seems like the nuclear weapons have sort of collapsed. It is also important to note that the COVID-19 vaccine that is going to North Korea will probably make things a little bit better. But it's unlikely that North Korea gets a lot of vaccines because they aren't open, and a lot of the UN non-governmental organizations that are trying to give out the COVID vaccine require you to be an open country so that they can see your distribution network. And if you don't have that, then you can't get the vaccine. It is also important to note that North Korea has issued warnings to the US over military drills, but that happens every 6 months, so I'm not really going to mention that. I'm just going to tack that on at the end to say that the Koreas are upset at each other again, and we'll see what happens. Of course, the answer will probably be nothing. So we will continue to cover North Korea, South Korea, and all the crazy antics of the Kim regime if you subscribe to In Progress on YouTube, or go to linktr.ee/raymondperez and find other ways to see the show. Next, we'll look at possible North Korean operative Josh Hawley and his complete and total meltdown over the woke infrastructure bill.